In exchange for healing her body, an ancient spirit has forbade Storm from using her powers for an entire week. Storm sought comfort in the familiar arms of the X-Men, but was summoned to a dinner date with Dr. Doom. She flies there now on the eve of her final powerless night. Lightning strikes and the wind howls as Storm closes in on Dr. Doom's castle, located in Doomstadt, Latveria. Rain pelts Storm's face as she rides atop the Razorbill. Storm is at the end of a deadly game, and the price for breaking the rules is obvious. In many African cultures, before the dead are buried, the body is first cleansed in water and adorned in opulent garments. They believe death ought to be celebrated, not mourned. For death is not the end, just a metamorphosis into something different, something more, something beautiful. Storm descends the spiraling staircase of Doom's castle in an outfit that defies description, as if walking straight out of the pages of a fairy tale or the portrait of a queen. But this queen doesn't simply stand on ceremony, and underneath the elegant dress and opulent jewels lie 2 knives fixed to the small of Storm's back. Just because she's powerless doesn't mean she's defenseless. Storm takes her seat across the God Emperor, who immediately compliments her immaculate taste. Storm is no stranger to flattery, but Doom claims that he never flatters. As Doom assures Ororo that she will never have to order anything while dining with him, the two catch each other's eyes. This is a position that both of them have been in at multiple times over the years. In fact, their entire relationship can be summed up by this very shot. When they first met, Doom ruled a country. Now he stands to rule the world. While Storm was still a relative new recruit of the X-Men, she had yet to lead the team or forge her own. She had yet to sit as the queen of a foreign country or on the ruling council of a nearby planet. And she had not titled herself as Earth's protector. So it's fitting that these two are reunited now that they've both elevated themselves. But as her dish is revealed, a bowl of gumbo with 2 garnishes forming an X at the center, Storm's mind is not on the present, but on the past. Several years ago, when she, as a little girl, ate beside her father, and this girl did not want to eat her father's cooking. But David Monroe was not content to just let Ndare do all the cooking, and so even though his dramatic 5-year-old was not looking forward to eating her slimy soup, he insisted that she take a spoonful. And when she did, she was pleasantly surprised. As is Storm in the present, when she takes a spoonful of Dr. Doom's gumbo and sees that it tastes just like her father's. She's amazed to see that he knows the recipe, but this is Doom we're talking about. Doom cuts to the chase, and finally gets to the reason why these two are dining across from each other tonight. He's sure that Storm, as a mutant who soars through the skies, is familiar with the tale of Icarus. He relates the metaphor to all of mutant kind, who had previously risen up far above mankind in the Krakoa era, but now have fallen lower than ever. The same also applies to Storm as an individual, who only days ago stood on the world stage and was prepared to open up her sanctuary to the masses, only to have them reject her as she told the truth about the Oklahoma incident, and then to be told that she only has hours to live. To be spared from the jaws of death by an ancient spirit, only to then be forbade from using her powers. Yet even now, she doesn't bow her head or cower in a corner. She gets dressed to the nines and dines with the God Emperor. Or as Dr. Doom put it, she reaches beyond the stars, always ignoring how often she comes crashing down. This is something that Doom knows personally, as the Sorcerer Supreme who holds the world as his plaything, a Romani who has faced discrimination by those who seek strength in majority, and as a man who has reached beyond the stars. He feels kinship with Storm and with mutant kind. Doom takes a stand in his matching green and black outfit, noticing that Storm is not taking a liking to the dessert. And so as a gesture of good faith, he orders that the cook be brought before her to be drawn and quartered. For Doom abhors incompetence, almost as much as Storm abhors needless violence. 2 hidden knives slice through the air, one going right through the would-be executioner, the other aimed right for Doom's eye, just as Rogue had advised in the previous issue. If this were anyone other than Dr. Doom, they'd be missing an eye right now. But this is not anyone else. Without lifting a finger, Doom halts the hurling knife in the air with his magic. Storm makes her stand with the train of her dress in hand, ordering the chef to be left alone. But Doom is confused. Why would Storm, who could wield the wind like swords, choose to throw knives of metal? Storm calls Doom out for choosing to make mutants his people at a time when many powerful governments are stockpiling Omega-level mutants like nuclear warheads. Doom is unrelenting in his questioning. Why would Storm choose to ride atop a bird when she could travel through lightning and appear in a flash, just as she did the first time she came to Doom's castle? Storm has not seen the virtue and solidarity of Doom. Not when Orcus was murdering her people, and not when they attacked her and the Avengers in the Afghan desert. Finally, she cuts to the chase and demands to know what Victor truly wants from mutants and from her. Doom puts Ororo in an impossible position, trapping her with a spell, not terribly unlike the one that encased her in chrome all those years ago. Only this time, she's fully aware of the outside and able to communicate. She just can't move. Not yet, at least. Doom deduces the truth. Ororo Monroe is powerless, but he needs them for the task ahead. He tells Storm to rejoice, for Doom is kind. Doom's peculiar kindness unlocks something in Storm, something that is core to her very being. For Storm is rational and the queen of restraint. But one thing she will not tolerate is being bound or confined. And in her innate need to reclaim her autonomy, her powers awaken once again. Even though she is no longer plagued by bouts of claustrophobia, she's still the same little girl who's always loved and craved freedom. To be restricted by the whims of another is just too much. So she orders Doom to let her go before she ends his reign before it even begins. But just as lightning erupts from her eye sockets, a feathered hand with clawed fingers stretches forward out of the abyss and erupts through Storm's torso. This is Egon, and he will not be cheated. Not even the descendant of Ashake will defy this spirit what was promised to him. And so he takes her life and prepares to take her planet. Storm lies cold and lifeless on Doom's floor as he begins to battle the ancient spirit. Skull fractured, jugular burst, spine broken, entrails mangled, punctured heart, splintered ribs. Ororo Monroe is dead, and Storm of the Earth is no more. In the spiritual plane, Ororo is reunited with her father. The two have missed each other immeasurably. Ororo wants both of her parents present so that she can tell them both about the wonderful life she's lived, from her first crush to her friends at Westchester, her new home in Atlanta, and her wedding. She was the queen of Wakanda, even though her mother always called her a princess. She needs to see her mother and tell her how her little girl saved the world so many times. But Ndare already knows. She's proud of her. Ororo knows that she's not going with her father, even though her parents would want nothing more than to have them with her again. Leaving Ororo all by herself is like leaving a flame in the wind. But they've seen her grow into a flame that refuses to be put out. The wind doesn't take from Ororo. It fuels her. She rides it as Hadari Yao. As a child, Ororo told her father to tell her mom that she loves her because she swore that slimy soup was going to be the death of her. But David told her that she'll have to tell her herself when she gets back from work. Now, David gives her that same message, saying she'll be able to tell her mother she loves her herself after Storm's white hair turns gray. And after a tearful goodbye to her father's spirit, the metamorphosis begins. Storm of Earth is no more. In her place, there will be something new, something more, something beautiful. Eternity returns and calls his eternal storm forth. She emerges, adorned again in white and gold that was teased at the end of issue 1. Only this isn't a tease. This is the real deal. Storm has ascended to a new form, one that's more than equipped to deal with the likes of Egon and any other cosmic force or deity that would stand against her. God damn, do we have a lot to talk about. The past 4 issues were a grand setup for something that has finally paid off at the end of this issue. But Murewa makes us work for it and wait for it even within the issue. Rather than rushing to an inevitable conclusion, he takes his time and lets wonderful tension build up before making a wonderful mess of things. Speaking of which, this death scene was so powerful. It's abrupt and absolute, just like the death itself. No warning, no lingering attempts at holding on. Just bam, and it's over. But he made sure not to end the issue with Storm still being dead. Part of me wishes that we would have had just a little more time to deal with Storm's death, whether that's in the fallout that it would inevitably cause in the physical world, or with Storm in the afterlife reconnecting with more of her family. But the Storm fan in me is so glad to see her fall and quickly rise again. Besides, what we did get, which was more father and daughter time between Ororo and David, was so good. Like any good father, David cherishes every moment he has with his princess, but he doesn't hold on too tightly because he knows that she has work to do. It's the bittersweet joy of every parent to let their child go, knowing they're ready for life without them. This entire issue is another buffet of Storm lore, from the time-honored Doom and Storm dinner trope, to Doom referencing her ability to teleport/transport herself via lightning, which she used to enter his castle for the first time back in the Uncanny X-Men days. And of course, there's the term that Storm's father used, Hadari Yao, which means Walker of Clouds. We first heard this term in the Coates Black Panther run during the same time where Storm's godhead power was introduced. The people of Wakanda bestowed the title onto Storm, revering her as the goddess who preserves the balance of all things. But for all the big moments and big references that we get, there are also several small moments sprinkled in. The crux of this issue is Storm's relationship with her father, and it's a very wholesome and intimate relationship. Also, the fact that Doom knew to cook up some homemade gumbo for Storm is such a deep cut, seeing as how gumbo is practically a universal black dish, enjoyed in several African and diasporan cultures. In a way, the dish itself is representative of who Storm is. She's not just African or Black American, culturally or ethnically. She's both. Speaking of Storm as a child, Murewa has such a distinct voice for little Ororo. She speaks with a voice that's both beyond its years and age appropriate. And like most 5-year-olds, she's picky and dramatic. Her usage of the word mum for her mother is interesting. You've likely heard people from the UK call their mothers mum, but Ororo obviously didn't get it from there. I don't know if it's people in Cairo who use that term more, or if it's consistent with a Kenyan accent. If so, then maybe she picked it up from her mother. Either way, feel free to illuminate your boy on the matter and let me know where you think she got it from in the comments. I know I'm talking a lot about Storm and her father, but this may just be the most one-on-one time we've seen her had with her father. Usually her mother's side of the family gets all the narrative focus. I mean, when was the last time we even examined Storm's paternal family line? Back when she met her grandparents right before she got married to T'Challa? That was how many years ago? Marvel, get it together. Or better yet, thank Murewa for getting it together for you. You're welcome. And while we're praising the issue, I'd be remiss if I did not gush on Lucas Wernick's art. There's a good mixture of gorgeous splash pages that honestly look like they belong hung up on somebody's wall in a museum, as well as peak comic book high-octane action panels, which is really impressive considering how little action there is in this issue. Also, it is so good to have an artist who isn't afraid to have Storm be drop dead sexy.
She's so fine, she done pissing me off. How are you that fine?
But it's a tasteful kind of sexy. Storm's sex appeal is more like spicy icing on her cake in this issue, rather than the main ingredient. Same goes for Storm's dress, jewelry, and hair, which are just as impeccable as you'd expect them to be. Storm knows how to dress regardless of the occasion. Another fact that this creative team takes every opportunity possible to remind us of. But this may be one of her best elegant outfits and best outfits in general. I wasn't exaggerating when I said she looked like she walked right out of a fairy tale page. And in terms of the larger plot, I don't think I've been this ready for the next issue since the end of issue 1. We've got Doom and his botched political pursuits, with an eternal Storm to deal with. I'm much less familiar with Doom and his recent ascension to God Emperor / Sorcerer Supreme, but we know how he fared the last time he tried to deal with a non-eternal Storm. I was thinking that they were going to end up coming to blows in the next issue, but according to some recent previews of issue number 5 that just dropped, literally as I'm recording this review, it looks more like they'll be teaming up. Now that's something I did not see coming at all, and if that's really what we getting next, my body is ready. That's all I can say. My body is ready.
Nope, wrong again.
Give it to me.
Now, as I'm sure you can guess, I don't have all that many critiques for this issue. Most of my critiques have to do with Dr. Doom, or excuse me, God Emperor Doom, Sorcerer Supreme. I feel like there was a line or two here that felt kinda out of place. Like his line about knowing discrimination as a Romani. Not that his facing of said discrimination was forced or anything. I mean, we already know that happened. But is Doom the type to reflect on people treating him cruelly in the past? He seems more like the type to always speak of himself as superior and not even acknowledge times in his life when people had power over him. Admittedly, I'm much less familiar with Dr. Doom as a character. Most of my experience with Doom comes from other media. And then there's the very high likelihood that he's just saying all that to appeal to Storm's empathy as a mutant. And if that's the case, then I have no problem with it at all. Then there's his whole near execution of his own cook. I know Doom is ruthless, but would he really kill one of his own countrymen because they cooked a dessert that an outsider didn't like? Is that something that's in character for him? Because I could have sworn that he rode harder for Latveria than anybody else. Now maybe he's abandoned that now that he's about to be God Emperor of the whole planet, or maybe he was never like that to begin with, and again, I'm just basing my knowledge of Doom off of things that I've heard and things that I've observed outside of the comics. But either way, all of these are minor issues at best and really didn't detract from my enjoyment of the issue. But I wouldn't be an honest reviewer if I only talked about the things that I liked. And speaking of detracting, let's take a minute and talk about some of Storm's detractors, because some people on social media have issues with this issue. Firstly, some folks have found it questionable that young Ororo would be eating gumbo since she was living in Cairo at the time. In fact, Cairo was really the only world she had ever known because she was a baby when her family moved from New York to Egypt. And apparently, since gumbo isn't a dish that's native to Egypt or all that popular in Egypt, they're calling foul. But her father, David, is from America, a place where gumbo is frequently cooked and consumed. But then some folks took issue with that too, since he's a New York native, hailing from Harlem specifically. But I don't think that makes all that big a deal, considering how many black people in New York have southern roots. Historically, New York was one of several settling spots for black Americans who fled the South during the Great Migration in the early and mid 1900s. Which, if you didn't know, is exactly what it sounds like. A large part of the black Southern population fled Jim Crow and racial violence to seek out new opportunities in the greater United States. So with this many black folks coming from the South, moving to New York and other places, it's not illogical to think that a black man in New York, even being born and raised there, would eat or know about gumbo. Some people even said that Ororo shouldn't remember how his gumbo tastes because it was so long ago, forgetting the fact that Ororo lost her parents in a very traumatic life event early in life, meaning that every memory that Storm has of her parents, no matter how trivial, would be precious to her, including meals that she shared with them. I feel like each month the problems that people have with this title just get more and more trivial. First, they were calling Storm full of herself in issue 1 because she wanted to open up her sanctuary to the world and had the sanctuaries floating above the city. Then they hated seeing her with Wolverine in the previous issue, and now her dad's cooking is the wrong food in issue 4. Can't wait for issue 5 to get here so we can start complaining about the color of her toenails or some other hard-hitting issue. And believe it or not, there is another issue at hand.
Let me tell you something! Oh, help me!
This one is regarding the whole Eternal Storm thing. The idea doesn't sit well with some folks who would rather see Storm make it all on her own, not needing the assistance of any other divine or cosmic beings. And while I do think it would be epic as all hell to see her reach that point, I don't think she's there yet. And I think there's a good reason for that. Remember, Storm only recently started consciously and consistently tapping into her mystical bloodline, and even that took some prodding from Scarlet Witch. It's really only been in the past couple years that we've seen her start to lean more on her ancestors, use magic, or tap into any latent divinity that she has laying around via the Godhead. All of these things are recent developments that expand on concepts that were previously just used as backstory or almost like window dressing for who Storm is. Like, we're really talking about the last 5 to 7 years maximum. Before that, most of this stuff was just footnotes. We knew her ancestor Ashake was a very powerful sorceress, and we knew that her maternal bloodline was full of practitioners of witchcraft and magic users who had strong connections to various gods. But how much of that mystical legacy did we see Storm walking in? Not much. Storm has always been a character who rejects supreme godly power-ups unless absolutely necessary. She's only used her godhead a handful of times, she's never whipped out the rogue Storm form since the first time, and any opportunities she's had to step into that side of herself willingly has been rejected, such as when she was shown her true potential by the Black Vortex. She rejected it and said they need to destroy that damn thing. Hell, even when it came to Stormcaster, she really only decided to start using that consciously towards the end of its life cycle. The temptation of absolute power is one that Storm usually rejects. So it makes sense that she'd have to go through a literal death and resurrection, prompted by eternity, in order to start walking in a form of cosmic divinity that's probably gonna be more permanent. But now that she has literally no choice, and she's been thrust into the pool of cosmic entityhood, no idea if that's a word or not, we're just gonna go with it, I can't wait to see what happens next. And looking at these previews for issue 5, I mean, it's literally gonna be an issue of epic and iconic proportions. But now it's time to hear from you. Sound off in the comments to let me know what you felt about this issue. Comment below and let me know, and then click on this video right here to get some more eternal Weather Witch goddessness in your life. And until next time, keep simping.